President Trump is on a letter-writing spree, it appears, sending word to 14 different countries telling them their tariff rate is about to go as high as 40%, even for some of America's closest allies and largest trading partners that get letters too, like Japan and South Korea. Trump now saying that they're about to see a new 25% tariff. But at the very same time, the president once again delayed and extended, whichever one you wanted to describe it as, the deadline for trade talks, now saying reciprocal tariffs will take effect August 1st instead of tomorrow, as the trade war kicks into round whichever you want to say it is. CNN's Harry Ennis took a look at how voters are feeling about all of these trade moves, because I don't know what round this is, but it is. We've seen the impact on markets. We've seen investors kind of try to pump the brakes on reacting in some cases because it's dragged on so long. But how are voters feeling about it? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would say that voters feel about the same way that folks felt about New Coke in the mid-1980s. They love them in theory and hate them in practice.
That is not the first time he has used that comparison. You are obsessed with New Coke.
I just love soda. That's the bottom line.
This is true. Keep
Okay, think tariffs hurt the economy. You know, go back to September of 2024 when Donald Trump was running for president, running for that second term. Just 39% thought that tariffs hurt the economy. Look at where this number has jumped up to in June of 2025. 57%. That's a nearly 20-point rise in less than a year, because they have seen the impact that tariffs and the thoughts of tariffs can have on the economy. And just 28% of Americans, voters, think that tariffs are now good for the U.S. economy, including just, get this, 16% of independents. So the bottom line is, like tariffs in theory, hate them in practice, and 57% of voters now say that they believe that tariffs hurt the economy.
But how does this fit into the short-term pain, long-term gain question in terms of, like, the Trump kept saying, just wait, it'll be great for you. But how is this impacting how voters view his handling of this?
Yeah, exactly right. And if you, all of a sudden, the hurt number has gone up, and so does the disapproval of Trump's disapproval rating of Trump on handling his trade policies. Look at this. Disapproval of Trump's trade policies. In January, it was 40%. Up like a rocket, up to 54% now in June. Just 35% of Americans approve of his trade policies. And get this, just 30% of independents approve of his trade policies. So voters are going against tariffs, thinking they're hurting the economy, and they're going against Trump in particular on his trade policy. Might have liked them at the beginning, might have liked them back during the campaign, but when they're actually in practice, they hate, hate, hate.
You have here also, because April was like the critical month. This was when Liberation Day set in. Why do you have April as like a pullout?
Yeah, why? Because the last time that the voters actually saw him in practice, right? And then all of a sudden he delayed it. Why did Trump pull back? Because the last tariff war hurt Trump's overall net approval rating. March 28th, the pre-tariffs, he was even ground. He was significantly better than he was during his first term at the same time. But then in just a matter of weeks, his net approval rating down into the gutter, down into the water, -6 points, and he has never recovered from it. So the last tariff war really hurt him, and he hasn't recovered yet. And I think that might be why Trump is a little bit hesitant to go back into the water, because he recognizes it just doesn't help him overall.
Maybe the manifestation of I'm firm, but not 100%.
Yeah, there you go.
John?
With the new Coke thing, I was concerned there was a glitch in the programming. I honestly thought that there was something wrong there, that we'd gone back to New Coke.
You were waiting for this circle back? There's never a circle back to it.
How about Crystal Pepsi?
Okay, I'm just saying, I'm glad you're okay.
It was delicious.
I'm glad you're okay. All right, with us now is Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat from Illinois who happens to be running for Senate from that state as well. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. So the original deadline for trade deals for the tariffs was April 9th, which then slid to July 9th, which is tomorrow, which is now sliding to August 1st, which is a few weeks from now, which the president says is firm, but not 100% firm. So if you are one of these countries, you know, South Korea, Tunisia, any one of these countries that's out there, what are you supposed to think of this moving target?
Well, you think that it's Taco Tuesday. You know, Trump always chickens out, he pivots, but the bottom line is it creates great uncertainty for small businesses and others, including in my district and in Illinois, and it really hurts them. They pause hiring, they pause investment. It's harder for them to get investment, and some are even beginning to lay people off. We just went to a small business that was going gangbusters before Liberation Day, and since then, because of the uncertainty created by this tariff chaos, they're laying people off. So it has real world consequences and it's hurting people and working families.
Well, it's his Oval Office version of the art of the deal. Donald Trump cranking up the pressure on America's trading partners. The US president sending a wave of letters to the heads of 14 countries on Monday, informing them of new reciprocal tariff rates of up to 40% unless a deal is reached, and warning against retaliation. Mr. Trump also taking some of the edge off, extending the deadline for those punishing tariffs for another month or so. Well, they were originally due to kick in Wednesday, but that has now been extended to August the 1st. And the president called the tariffs, quote, firm, but not 100%, indicating it is not too late to negotiate.
All I say to the other countries is, some of them wanted to make a deal and want to be fair. Others perhaps got a little bit spoiled. They were a little bit spoiled because for 30, 40 years, 50 years, they were taking advantage of the country. So we're going to, I would say, final, but if they call with a different offer and if I like it, we'll do it.
All right, CNN's senior reporter Matt Egan is live in New York with the very latest. Now, do you just want to bring up the futures market if we can? I'm going to ask my producer to do that. So I think it's really indicative of this sense of, what is going on here? Investors certainly not convinced that there is a kind of, a route through, it seems, at present. These are very mixed markets after, some real nerves across Wall Street yesterday. A real sense here of what is going on. Can you help us out?
Well, Becky, this is just the latest confusing twist in the president's trade wars. And obviously, the tariff situation has already confused investors and small business owners and Federal Reserve officials for months. And, in this latest chapter, really, you could argue it a few different ways, right? And on the one hand, it could be viewed as an escalation because the president did send out these letters to 14 different countries threatening to increase tariffs. On the other hand, though, you could also chalk this up as another delay, another example of kicking the can down the road, because as you noted, these tariffs were supposed to take effect tomorrow. Now that deadline has been pushed back to August 1st, which does allow for additional time to negotiate. And as you can see on your screen, a lot of these new tariff rates, they're very close to what the president had announced on Liberation Day in early April. Those levels had really unnerved investors. These are, for the most part, right in line, just shy, or in the case of Japan, slightly higher than those Liberation Day tariffs. Now, as far as the market reaction, we did see a retreat in U.S. markets yesterday, but it wasn't a dramatic sell-off, right? And it did come after U.S. stocks had spiked to all-time highs. Now you see U.S. futures, the S&P 500 set to open slightly higher, the NASDAQ as well, the Dow little change. I do think that there's some skepticism, understandably, among investors that these tariffs are actually going to kick in. Goldman Sachs put out a note to its clients today where they said they do not think that ultimately these tariff rates that have been proposed are going to take effect. And we do know that there is the taco trade on Wall Street, right? That investors believe that Trump always chickens out. Bob Elliott, a veteran investor, he said on social media, he said taco is consensus and already fully priced in at these levels. On the other hand, though, he also noted that the trouble is without the pain of falling markets, he won't chicken out. So there's an interesting dynamic there where it feels like a lot of investors are not overreacting here because they do think that Trump will back down. But ultimately, if the market is not holding Trump's feet to the fire, then he may not have a reason to back down. Becky?
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's good to have you. Thank you.